Every building she goes into is a different energy.
How do you explain her?
Kobe Bryant with a ponytail. Seriously, like apex predator.
We're on the bus and we're all just kind of like, oh my gosh.
The 2024 Women's National Basketball Association season wasn't just a basketball schedule, it was a cultural collision, a multi-billion-dollar case study in gatekeeping, and ultimately the most significant shift in the history of North American women's sports. To understand what happened, you have to look past the box scores. You have to look at the friction between an entrenched old guard and a tidal wave of new interest that centered entirely on one person, Caitlin Clark. This wasn't a seamless passing of the torch. It was a battleground. For months, the narrative was that the league, the media, and the legends of the game were trying to humble the rookie from Iowa. They wanted to give her a reality check, to remind her that the professional ranks are different from the collegiate ones. But by the time the final buzzer sounded on the season, it was clear that the plan had backfired. Instead of diminishing her, the challenges galvanized her fan base, validated her resilience, and catalyzed an economic explosion that changed the financial reality of the WNBA forever. Long before Caitlin Clark ever stepped onto a professional court, the battle lines were drawn. The transition from college to the pros is usually a standard story arc, but this was different. This was institutional. It started with the legends. Diana Taurasi, the league's all-time leading scorer and the personification of the WNBA's grit, set the tone. During the ESPN coverage of the Final Four, while millions were watching Clark lead Iowa, Taurasi issued a warning that would define the entire preseason. Reality is coming. She wasn't just talking about the jump in talent, she was talking about levels. She told the world that while Clark looked superhuman playing against 18-year-olds, she was about to face grown women who had been professionals for a long time. Analytically, she was right. The WNBA is faster, stronger, and more physical, but to the millions of new fans Clark was bringing to the sport, it didn't sound like veteran wisdom, it sounded like a threat. It was interpreted as a declaration that the league's veterans were waiting in the tall grass to dismantle the hype. As the season progressed, the rhetorical barrage intensified. If Taurasi's comments were the psychological framing, Cheryl Swoops provided the misinformation. Swoops, a three-time MVP and Hall of Famer, went on the Gills Arena podcast and made a series of demonstrably false claims to delegitimize Clark's NCAA scoring record. She claimed Clark needed 5 years to break the record and that she was taking 40 shots a game. In reality, Clark broke the record in 4 years and took far fewer shots than Swoops alleged. This wasn't just bad analysis, it was a calculated attempt to undercut the rookie's achievements before she even entered the league. The backlash was immediate. It even destroyed a decades-long friendship between Swoops and Nancy Lieberman. Lieberman tried to correct the stats, telling Swoops that facts matter, and it led to a total falling out. This was the environment Caitlin Clark was entering, one where legends were willing to burn bridges over her mere existence. The narrative of jealousy became the lens through which every game was viewed. Pundits like Stephen A. Smith and legendary analyst Dick Vitale began calling out what they saw as pure jealousy from WNBA veterans. They argued that instead of embracing the player who was about to make them all rich, the league's established stars were being petty and resentful. I threw one, and when the games finally started, that reality Taurasi promised took a very physical form. The flashpoint happened on June 1st, 2020. The Indiana Fever were playing the Chicago Sky. In a dead ball situation while waiting for an inbound pass, Sky guard Chennedy Carter lined up Caitlin Clark and delivered a massive hip check that sent her sprawling to the floor. It wasn't a basketball play, it was a targeted hit. The officials initially called it a common foul, but the league office later upgraded it to a flagrant one. In the post-game press conference, Carter's refusal to even say Clark's name, saying "I ain't answering no Caitlin Clark questions," only fueled the fire. It was a Rorschach test for the league. To some, it was just welcome to the W. To others, it was a targeted assault on the league's most valuable asset. The physical gauntlet continued with the Angel-Reese rivalry. Born in the 2023 NCAA championship, the tension between Clark and Reese was the primary engine of the media narrative. During one matchup, Reese was assessed a flagrant foul for a clothesline hit to Clark's head. Reese argued she was making a play on the ball, but the optics were devastating. The repeated hard fouls, combined with Reese's comments about Clark getting a special whistle, created a hostile atmosphere that ironically drove viewership to record highs. Fans weren't just watching basketball, they were watching a drama where the protagonist was being physically tested every night. Then came the eye poke. Late in the season, during a playoff game against the Connecticut Sun, Diana Carrington made contact with Clark's eye while swiping for the ball, leaving her with a visible black eye. Replays showed Carrington's long fingernails making direct contact. While no foul was called, Carrington's subsequent mocking of Clark, mimicking a flopping motion, drew condemnation from across the sports world. It was the capstone to a season where it felt like the league's players were more interested in checking Clark than competing with her. And yet, through all the hits and all the insults, Clark stayed silent. She rarely engaged with the hater narratives. When asked about the physical play, she gave basketball answers. This refusal to play the victim while visibly taking the hits made her aggressors look even pettier. Her silence was her most powerful commentary. It resonated with a broad audience that was getting tired of the drama and just wanted to see her play. But the humbling wasn't just happening on the court, it was happening in the boardrooms. The most controversial institutional decision of the year was the exclusion of Caitlin Clark from the 2024 U.S. Olympic women's basketball team. The selection committee cited basketball criteria and a lack of international experience. But to anyone watching the business side, it was a staggering missed opportunity. By leaving the most popular female athlete on the planet at home, USA Basketball prioritized a rigid hierarchy over a massive growth opportunity. NBC, the broadcaster, was reportedly furious. Reports surfaced that the decision was influenced by a desire to avoid the circus that follows Clark. But this decision backfired in the most ironic way possible. It gave Clark a month of rest. After playing a grueling college season and jumping straight into the WNBA, she needed a break. When she came back from that Olympic hiatus, she wasn't just good, she was unstoppable. The snub effectively rejuvenated the very player it was meant to sideline. The ultimate rebuttal to the humbling narrative was the performance. The season started poorly for the Indiana Fever. They opened 1-8. The schedule was a gauntlet, and Clark was struggling with turnovers and shooting efficiency. The "I told you so" chorus was deafening. But then, things shifted. Clark forged a connection with Aaliyah Boston and Kelsey Mitchell. The chemistry clicked. By the end of the year, the struggling rookie narrative was dead. Clark didn't just break rookie records, she broke all-time league records. She set the single-season assist record with 337. She set the rookie scoring record with 769 points. She became the first rookie in history to record a triple-double, and then she did it again. She set the single-game assist record with 19. She was named the unanimous Rookie of the Year and voted to the All-WNBA First Team. The reality that arrived wasn't that Clark couldn't handle the league, it was that the league couldn't handle Clark. But the most profound failure of the attempt to humble her was economic. The league's gatekeepers may have wanted her to wait her turn, but the league's bank account couldn't afford it. The Caitlin Clark effect was a financial tsunami. The Indiana Fever became a traveling circus, selling out arenas across the country. They set a single-season attendance record with over 340,000 fans. Opposing teams started moving their games to larger NBA arenas just to accommodate the crowds. The WNBA saw double-digit growth across all 12 teams, but the Fever led the way with a staggering 319% increase. The TV ratings were even more explosive. Clark's games consistently drew over 1 million viewers, numbers that the WNBA had never seen outside of a few isolated instances. She was responsible for 45% of the total broadcast value of the entire league. This leverage allowed Commissioner Kathy Engelbert to secure a historic media rights deal worth $2.2 billion over 11 years. That's a 233% increase from the previous deal. This money will fund player salaries and league expansion for a decade. The very veterans who criticized Clark are now going to see their paychecks grow because of her. And then there are the charter flights. For years, WNBA legends had fought for the right to fly private for safety and recovery, but the league always said it was too expensive. But because of the security risks associated with Clark's fame, the crowds at airports, the fans following the team, the league was forced to act. They committed $50 million to fund full-time charter flights for every team. The rookie they tried to humble brought the luxury and security that the veterans had failed to achieve on their own for 25 years. As we look back from 2026, the 2024 season is remembered as a failed hazing. The old guard tried to impose a traditional hierarchy on a player who was bigger than the tradition itself. They used media skepticism, misinformation, physical intimidation, and institutional exclusion to try and put her in her place. It didn't work. Caitlin Clark didn't just survive the reality check. She rewrote the reality of the league. She proved she was a superstar. She secured the bag for her peers, and she exposed the pettiness of the gatekeepers. Diana Taurasi was right. Reality was coming, but it wasn't the reality of a rookie failing. It was the reality of the Caitlin Clark economy crushing the old way of doing business. The league tried to humble her, but in the end, they had to thank her. The 2024 season wasn't a humbling, it was a hostile takeover, and Caitlin Clark emerged as the undisputed CEO of the new WNBA. To really appreciate the depth of this shift, you have to look at the individual moments where the friction was most visible. Take the discourse around the white bee plans comment from Pat McAfee. On June 3rd, McAfee, trying to defend Clark's impact, used a racial and gendered slur that ignited a national firestorm. It forced an apology, but more importantly, it stripped away the subtext of the season. It forced everyone to acknowledge the racial and cultural tensions that were simmering under the surface. The WNBA is a league predominantly composed of Black and queer women who have worked for decades without recognition. To see a white player from Iowa suddenly become the face of the league and bring in all the corporate money was a bitter pill for many to swallow. Stephen A. Smith pointed out that this race thing was an undeniable undercurrent to the resentment. But while the media was screaming, Clark remained a masterclass in deflection. She didn't engage in the culture war, she played basketball, and that's why the backfire was so complete. If Clark had been a mediocre player, the reality check would have worked. The veterans would have been proven right, the hype would have died down, and the league would have returned to its slow, incremental growth. But Clark was better than advertised. She didn't just meet the expectations, she exceeded them while being hunted on the court. By the time the Fever made their playoff run, the narrative had shifted from, "Is she good enough?" to "How do we stop her?" The economic data from 2024 tells the final story. Before Clark, the Fever averaged about 2,000 fans a game. After Clark, they averaged 17,000. Merchandise sales were up 601% league-wide, with Clark's jersey being the top seller. The Clark gap in viewership was so large that networks began prioritizing Fever games over matchups between former champions. This wasn't just a rookie bump. This was a fundamental restructuring of the league's value proposition. The 2024 season will go down as the year the WNBA grew up, but it will also be remembered for the growing pains that almost tore it apart. The efforts to humble Caitlin Clark didn't just fail, they provided the fuel for her ascent. Every hard foul became a highlight that drew more viewers. Every snub became a reason for fans to be more loyal. Every insult became a data point for why the league needed to change. In the end, the league didn't humble Caitlin Clark. Caitlin Clark humbled the league's expectations of what was possible. She took the hits, she took the insults, she took the snubs, and she turned them into a $2 billion empire. The old guard still has their rings and their legacies, but Caitlin Clark has the future. And as 2026 unfolds, that future looks brighter than anyone, even her most vocal critics ever thought possible. The reality that Taurasi spoke of finally arrived, and it turns out, reality looks a lot like a number 22 jersey selling out in every city in America. The story of 2024 is the story of a player who was too big to be put in her place. It's the story of a business that tried to resist its own growth because that growth didn't look the way they expected it to. But the numbers don't lie, and the wins don't lie. By the time the Fever were hoisting their playoff banners and the league was signing its new TV deals, the gatekeepers had to admit the truth. They tried to humble her, and it was the best thing that ever happened to them. The 2024 WNBA season was the year the reality changed, and Caitlin Clark was the one who changed it. She didn't just enter the league, she conquered it, and she did it while the whole world was waiting for her to trip. She never did. She just kept running, and she took the whole league with her.